Bullish on AMD. Welcome to the AMD stock analysis. This is StockerFinance. I am your host, David Scheuer. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at StockerFinance for more information. So today, AMD surged 12.54% following its earnings. Its earnings beat expectations. They raised guidance. We're going to talk about why that's a huge deal and why I think they actually have a lot more to go despite this massive surge in their stock price over the past day, the past year, and even the past 5 years. AMD has just been on a rampage as they continue to innovate, as they continue to take more and more market share from the semiconductor industry and just outcompete their competitors as well. So in the past 5 days, AMD's up 23.32%. In the past 1 month, it's up 44.63%. Year to date, 54.97%. And in the past 5 years, it's up around 4,000%. Just an incredible return there on your investment if you're an AMD investor in the past year, even in the past month or 5 days, or even if you invested before earnings as a bullish investor. You've had a great return on your money, and that's due to a bunch of different factors that we're going to go over, and we're also going to talk about why this rally is not done yet, in my opinion, why AMD still has a lot more to grow. They have a lot more coming for them. Their market cap is currently 89.12 billion. Their PE ratio is 147.33. That may seem high, but I'm going to talk about at the end of this video why that's actually not that crazy of a number for a PE ratio for a company like AMD. So now let's just look at their financials before we really dive into the rest of the stuff here. First off, you see revenue, operating income, and gross profit, just steady growth across all factors here, all fronts, growing steady. That's what you like to see. Year over year growth. Lisa Su has done a really great job. Same with net income, the steady growth there. Margins also growing. We see profit margins just below 10%. Same with operating margin. Gross margin continuing to grow, nearing 50% in gross margin there. If we look at operating expenses, it is growing as well. That may be concerning to some of you, saying, oh my God, is that why their profit margin is so low? Because they're spending so much money? Well, I think this is actually really good news. They're playing the long term here, and they're innovating so much. They're just outcompeting their competitors with all their different innovations. And this is pretty incredible. That's the main reason why the biggest operating expense, as you see on this simple graph here, is R&D, research and development. So, in my opinion, research and development is a great thing for AMD to be spending a lot of money on right now to continue to innovate, push their competitors to their limits, etc. Now, if we look at growth as well, just steady growth on revenue, operating expenses kind of following that as well. Now, cash. They have a ton of cash. This is something I actually didn't realize until this earnings. I guess I haven't really paid too much attention to how much cash AMD has on hand, but to have it nearly 2 billion, well, 1.8 billion US dollars in cash on hand is a huge deal for AMD, especially with how much money they're spending. It just shows they have a lot of more available cash to spend, to continue to innovate, to acquire different things, whatever it may be. It's a good sign that they have this much cash on hand, and that's continuing to increase. So AMD has solid fundamentals, as you just saw. And Dr. Lisa Su, aka Goddess Lisa Su, has been leading the charge for AMD. And I really want to talk about Lisa Su, how she's turned the company around, because she took over in 2012 when AMD was in a really difficult place, and she completely transitioned this company into what it is today and the powerhouse that it is today. And it just really shows how good leadership matters in a company. It's so important to trust in the leadership, especially the CEO. And you see that across tons of different companies. It's one of Warren Buffett's biggest investing philosophies, is to know the leadership and to have good leadership for the companies that he owns and that he's invested in. It's one of the biggest key points that he talks about in his investing strategy, and I completely agree with that. And I think Dr. Lisa Su is just an outstanding leader, and for what she's done for AMD and continues to do is pretty incredible. So AMD is continuing to take market share. They're innovating. They're proving it can withstand difficult economic uncertainty as they did this quarter. But how much more can it go? This is a question because of the massive rally it's been on over the past 5 years, the past month, now a 12% jump today after earnings. How much more can AMD keep growing? Well, this video is going to show why I think there's a lot more to come for AMD, why it's going to continue to grow, etc. So, and we just want to take some clips here from Lisa Su, and I'm also going to talk about her story with AMD in this brief little article that was written by, this one was written by the Motley Fool, and the next one is written by CNN. So we're going to go through these before we go on to what is to come for AMD in the future. So better still, sales of Ryzen and EPYC processor generate higher profit margins for AMD than sales of some of its other chips. Sorry about that. In turn, AMD's gross margin improved by 3 percentage points year over year to 44%. All told, AMD's adjusted operating and net income more than doubled to $233 million and $216 million respectively. Now what? So these outstanding results prompted AMD to boost its full year financial guidance. That is super important. That was one of the biggest part of its earnings. It beat analyst expectations, and then it didn't just beat it, but it said, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to get even better in the future. We're raising our financial guidance, which is something that is really good to see for a company, especially in today's times with how much uncertainty there is with the economy and politics, etc. So the company is now forecasting 2020 revenue growth of roughly 32%, driven by broad-based gains across its personal computer data center and gaming products. Despite some macroeconomic uncertainty, this is a quote from Lisa Su, by the way, we are raising our full-year revenue outlook as we enter our next phase of growth, driven by the acceleration of our business in multiple markets, end quote. That's super good news for AMD in the future. So now I'm going to read this article about Lisa Su and why she's just such a good leader and what she's done for AMD. I'm going to try to paraphrase some of this since it is kind of a long article. If you want to read it for yourself, I'll link it below. Even though the company was bleeding money, laden with debt, and staring down a potential bankruptcy, becoming chief executive of chipmaker Advanced Micro Devices was a dream job for Lisa Su. When you grow up as a tech person, and I spent my career in semiconductors, there aren't that many large US semiconductor companies, so I was really excited to become the CEO, Su told CNN Business. She liked that she could walk around at Best Buy and pick up a laptop, knowing that the microchip processor her company built was powering it. I think that's great because that is just something that just shows that she's passionate about this sector in the company as well. All right, let's continue on. Not everyone would have been so enthusiastic. When Su took the helm of AMD in 2014, its stock was heading toward an all-time low. But Su, now one of the most powerful women in tech, likes a challenge. She says that's why she's become an engineer in the first place. She had to make bold bets, some of which wouldn't begin to pay off for 5 years to turn AMD around. The reason it takes so long is it is extraordinarily complex, Su said. Our latest chip for data centers is actually 40 billion transistors. You've got to get every single one of them right, and there's just a lot of engineering to do that. Discovering what AMD is really, really good at. We're going to continue on here. So several years before Su became chief executive, AMD had taken the steps to cut costs by getting out of certain areas of business, including spinning off ownership of the foundry that manufactured its semiconductors. When Su took over, some of her biggest decisions were about what not to do. It's really important when you're a technology company to decide what you are really, really good at because you have to be the best. Number one or number two, Su said. It's all about Sorry, I gotta swallow here. It's all about focusing on, hey, this is the DNA of the company. Let us make it as great as possible in terms of what we can bring to the market. But doing that also meant thinking critically about which areas AMD was less likely to dominate. The company decided not to pursue building technology for mobile phones or sensors for Internet of Things machines, promising areas of development, but ones that fell outside of AMD's core competency. Instead, the company decided to make a big bet on high-performance computing architecture, including powerful computing processors and graphics chips for gaming, artificial intelligence, supercomputing, and other bleeding-edge technologies. AMD was building fast and powerful chips and often undercutting its competitors on price. The strategy was especially important for a company that, at the time, was struggling to carve out a niche for itself in an industry dominated by a relatively small number of key players. AMD's products are so convincing that the U.S. Department of Energy chose AMD's chips to power its supercomputer project at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee. Its technology will also help power the upcoming exascale class supercomputer at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, the kind of high-performance computer crucial for nuclear deterrence. Semiconductor companies long ran on what referred to as a tick-tock development cycle. Companies would alternate between improving the manufacturing process for chips and improving the design details within the chips themselves. That way, if something doesn't work, it's easy to tell which piece of the system is broken. But AMD was desperate for a boost, so it decided to tackle both of these things simultaneously, creating an entire new product portfolio. They made huge bets in terms of process technology, architecture, and packaging, said Hans Mosa, managing director at Rosenblatt Securities, comparing the success of the move to planetary alignment. It's a once-in-a-generation thing they are able to do that. Early on, some potential customers questioned whether the company would be able to execute on such an ambitious plan. There was a little bit of convincing, Su said. The way we approached it was, look, let me tell you what I'm going to do, and it's going to take me 3 years before I have anything for you to look at, but I'm going to keep telling you. I'm going to keep showing you, and that's what we've done. AMD released the first generation of the new product portfolios that resulted from those efforts. Desktop processors called the Ryzen and server processors called the EPYC in 2017, and released the third generation of Ryzen in 2019. The first generations of Ryzen and EPYC were kind of like, okay, we think you did a good job here. What's the follow-up? Said Kevin Crowell, principal analyst at Trios Research. The second generation have now convinced the market that they are serious. The company plans to release the third generation of EPYC for data centers later this year. I'm going to talk about that in a second. AMD versus Intel. While Su was turning AMD around, major rival Intel was sputtering. Intel struggled to move a 14nm chip to a smaller, more powerful 10nm chip. During that difficult transition, Intel's supply of 14nm chips used in personal computers failed to meet demand last year, an issue that forced it to release an unusual public apology in November. Meanwhile, AMD brought a processor equivalent in power to the 10nm chip to market ahead of Intel and developed a product architecture that allows it to keep costs low. During the difficult transition, Intel's supply of... we already read that part. Intel's challenges have cleared the runaway for AMD to grab a larger slice of the market share in key areas. Intel's lack of execution, AMD's flawless execution, has yet to play out in terms of the market share AMD is going to gain in the coming years. I wouldn't be surprised if they captured half of the data center market, Mosaman said. Definitely pronounced his name wrong, sorry about that. The data center market has become a priority for AMD as a growing number of companies look to shift their operations to the cloud and as a data-intensive next-generation technologies like 5G begin to emerge. It's an industry that could present a $20 billion to $30 billion opportunity for semiconductor companies over the next few years, according to Mosa. And that is the end of that article. I know it's kind of long there. I just think it really summarized AMD, Lisa Su's story of how she turned AMD around. I think it just did a great job at doing that. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I did a good job reading that for you guys. So what's in store for AMD? What is next after all of this, after this massive rally in its stock price? Its performance has been increasing, continuing to innovate. We've seen that Intel's struggling, etc., and its recent earnings have shown that as well. Well, we have some great news coming up. First, I've got the PS5 and Xbox Series X. AMD's chips are in both consoles. Now, full disclosure, I'm invested in both Sony and Microsoft. So whether the PS5 does better or the Xbox Series X does better, which I personally think the PS5 is going to do a little better, in my opinion, than the Xbox, AMD is going to benefit from both of those, and that's fantastic. Demand will skyrocket initially, as Lisa Su was kind of talking about, and then it will come in waves through different holiday seasons, different birthdays, whatever it might be. Different holidays is probably the main thing there. She was just saying that's kind of a pattern with these consoles, was that'll have a huge surge initially, and then it'll kind of come in weird waves after that, as it does. AMD is expecting to begin shipping its Zen 3 based Milan, sorry if I'm pronouncing this name wrong, EPYC processors. Shipping is supposed to begin late this year, so we'll see about that. Hopefully that happens. AMD's upcoming CDNA based data center GPUs are also set to launch around the same time, which is great. Expansion of new server products as well. We're seeing new products launch in the second half of this year as well, which is going to be great. Can't wait for that. AMD is expecting EPYC sales to continue to grow, as they talked about in their earnings and with their guidance as well. Expected to gain market share as more server vendors further ramp up their EPYC server production. They also have Ryzen Mobile, which they're expecting continued and further success on track to launch the Zen 3 client CPUs in late 2020, which I think I might have already stated that. RDNA 2 products, and to quote them, which will eventually encompass a full stack refresh, which is that's super interesting there, will launch in late 2020. So late 2020, a lot is happening there, and I can't wait to see what happens. They're just packing a lot into that time frame, and I think that definitely has to do a lot with their earnings that happen right after that. And they're simply out-innovating its competitors as time goes on, as we're seeing. So one last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up this video is the PE ratio. I said I'd talk about this at the beginning. I'm showing Amazon on the screen right now because it's a PE ratio of 144.91, fairly similar to that of AMD's. Now, do you think Amazon is an overvalued company? I personally don't. I know this is a really drastic comparison to make, and these companies aren't similar really at all. But the point I'm trying to make is that high-tech companies, fast growth companies, companies that are innovating, that are taking market share, etc., they tend to have high PE ratios, especially when their stock is super in demand and when the name of their company is really, really popular amongst investors, especially retail investors as well. So AMD has a high PE ratio, but I think its fundamentals, its innovation completely backs that PE ratio up. I don't think it's overvalued right now. I think it's just projecting ahead into the future as the PE ratio does, which is pretty incredible. So anyways, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, follow at StockerFinance on Twitter, and check out these videos as well. Thanks to my one Patreon, Sarah White. It's awesome there. And anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.